Welcome, curious minds, to our epic historical journey. We step onto the crimson sands of ancient Rome to find the truth.
You likely picture gladiators as desperate slaves, cast into the grand arena to perish for the roaring crowd. But what if I told you this incredibly popular belief is nothing but a massive illusion forged by modern films? Recent, magnificent discoveries paint a completely different picture of these ancient fighters and their ruthless world. They were actually highly compensated superstars. Let us now dive deeper into the real Roman arena to find out more. The year is 80 AD, and the mighty Colosseum finally opens its massive iron gates to the screaming public. According to enduring ancient myths, this monumental structure was nothing more than a final tragic stage for the weak. We often imagine starving prisoners mercilessly dragged from dark dungeons into the blinding and unforgiving sunlight. Stripped entirely of their humanity, they were supposedly handed broken weapons and forced to fiercely fight against their will. The massive crowd in the stands would roar with pure, aggressive fervor, demanding devastating ruin for their entertainment. Many believe that entering this magnificent grand arena was an inescapable and tragic conclusion for anyone. A gladiator was seen as a disposable instrument, meant to perish just to amuse the incredibly wealthy Roman elites. Their lives seemingly hung by a precarious thread, entirely controlled by the cruel emperor sitting high above. With a casual wave of his hand, or a simple thumbs down, the mighty ruler could permanently end a fighter's existence. This profoundly dark and terrifying narrative has been passed down through generations, shaping our modern understanding. Hollywood movies have cemented this intensely tragic image of the helpless slave crying out before meeting his doom. We vividly picture them shivering in fear, knowing they would never see their cherished families or the outside world again. The sheer overwhelming scale of the Colosseum only amplified this deep feeling of complete helplessness and utter despair. Later historians often painted the mighty Roman Empire as a savage civilization obsessed with tragic destruction. They described crimson rivers soaking the yellow sand, while thousands of entirely innocent lives were tragically extinguished. But was the absolute reality of the Roman games truly this chaotic? Or is there a hidden layer we are missing? If every fighter perished so quickly, how could the vast empire sustain such massive and constant entertainment demands? Training a skilled warrior takes time and vast resources, making it highly illogical to simply discard them like garbage. This brings us to a massive contradiction in the historical records that modern archaeology has finally uncovered. If you were a Roman citizen, would you truly risk your own life in the grand arena just to achieve absolute eternal glory? The historical truth is far more complex than the simple tales of good versus evil that we have always been taught to believe. To understand the real gladiators, we must look far beyond the imperial box and dig deeply into the ancient training camps. We must leave the massive, roaring crowd behind and enter the hidden, highly organized world of this lucrative ancient business. They were not just victims of a cruel society. They were the celebrated stars of a massive, highly profitable industry. Their bodies were finely tuned instruments, managed by wealthy businessmen who saw them as incredibly valuable assets. The business of the arena was highly regulated, strictly driven by heavy profit margins and careful strategic planning. It was a remarkably brutal economy, where incredible fame and fortune could actually be won by the most courageous. Let us now gracefully step into the mysterious shadows of the Ludus, where the true story of these ancient warriors unfolds. Welcome to the formidable Ludus, the elite schools where gladiators were forged into highly disciplined fighting machines. Recent archaeological excavations have revealed these facilities were absolutely far from being filthy, neglected prisons. Instead, they resembled modern professional sports complexes, wonderfully equipped with heated baths and specialized medical wings. The strong men who lived here were heavy financial investments, exclusively owned by a wealthy manager known as the lanista. According to ancient Roman ledgers, a single top-tier gladiator could cost a tremendous fortune, equal to a large estate.
Therefore, the powerful Lanista did absolutely everything in his power to keep his valuable human property healthy.
They were fed a specific, nutritious diet, heavy in barley and beans, cleverly designed to build a thick layer of body fat. This protective body fat acted as natural armor, successfully shielding their vital organs from shallow crimson surface wounds. Whenever they were severely injured, they received the absolute best medical care available in the ancient Mediterranean. Famous physicians like Galen of Pergamon built grand careers by healing these arena injuries. These expert doctors used advanced surgical techniques, herbal anesthetics, and strict hygiene to prevent devastating infections. The daily training regimen was incredibly strict, intensely focusing on endurance, precise footwork, and martial discipline. They practiced endlessly, with heavy wooden swords called the rudis, building immense physical strength and perfect muscle memory. This was definitely not a chaotic brawl. It was a refined martial art, requiring years of absolute dedication to master. Surprisingly, not all of these fighters were slaves captured in distant wars, or criminals condemned to the unforgiving Crimson Sands. Ancient historical texts confirm that many free Roman citizens actually volunteered to join the celebrated gladiator ranks. These brave men, known as octorati, signed strict contracts, trading freedom for a chance at massive wealth. They willingly swore a sacred oath to endure burning, binding, harsh beating, and even tragic ruin for their wealthy masters. Why would a legally free man consciously choose this brutal life? Because the arena offered a rare path to financial success. A successful champion could earn far more in a single afternoon than a common Roman soldier could make in an entire lifetime. They became ancient celebrities, their famous names and faces carved into city walls, oil lamps, and expensive mosaic floors. Wealthy aristocratic women were widely known to pay massive fortunes just to spend a single night with a famous champion. Even their sweat and the dirt scraped carefully from their skin were meticulously collected and sold as highly prized aphrodisiacs. They were the ultimate paradox. Socially disgraced outcasts, who were simultaneously worshipped exactly like living demigods. The Lanista carefully managed their careers, strategically matching them against appropriate opponents for a spectacular show. It was a very delicate balance of risk and reward, where a thrilling performance was far more important than a sudden demise. Imagine being a superstar who could lose absolutely everything, including your life, in a single fleeting moment. Would you fight? The vast empire desperately needed these heroes to distract the restless masses from poverty, corruption, and their daily struggles. Bread and circuses was the ultimate strategy, and the gladiators were the shining centerpieces of this grand Roman illusion. They perfectly represented the ultimate martial virtues of Rome: courage, endurance, and the absolute contempt for tragic ruin. By showing such magnificent bravery, they validated the empire's military culture and its total dominance over the world. But how did they ensure these highly valuable assets didn't simply destroy each other in the very first chaotic minute? To answer that, we must look very closely at the strict rules, the professional referees, and the intricate combat systems. The roaring crowd falls completely silent as two specialized fighters proudly step onto the crimson sands of the mighty Colosseum. This is not a random street fight. It is a beautifully choreographed duel between two completely distinct martial disciplines. On one side stands the retiarius, armed only with a heavy net and a sharp iron trident. He relies entirely on his phenomenal speed, agility, and tactical evasion to easily trap his heavily burdened opponent. Facing him is the formidable Secutor, a walking fortress encased in heavy bronze armor and a truly massive wooden shield. His smooth, heavy helmet offers ultimate protection, but severely limits his vision and breathing in the sweltering Roman heat. This classic epic matchup represents the eternal struggle between speed and strength, designed to provide maximum entertainment. But the absolute most crucial element of this thrilling spectacle is not the fighters themselves, but the man standing between them.
Records show every match was carefully monitored by a senior referee known as the Summa Rudis.
Dressed in a pristine white tunic with red stripes, he carried a long wooden staff to firmly enforce the strict ancient arena rules.
If a fighter was unfortunately disarmed, tripped, or severely injured, the referee would immediately step in to pause the combat. He perfectly ensured fair play, prevented illegal strikes, and made sure the fight lasted long enough to satisfy the paying crowd. Due to these strict regulations, modern analysis suggests the actual arena fatality rate was surprisingly much lower. Prominent historians estimate that in the 1st century, only about 1 in 10 professional matches actually ended in tragedy. If the loser fought incredibly bravely, the roaring crowd would joyfully spare his precious life to fight another glorious day. This surprising mercy was not born from simple kindness. Destroying a trained professional was a huge financial waste. The immensely rich owner of the fallen warrior naturally demanded huge financial compensation from the powerful Roman leaders. Therefore, the incredibly wealthy organizers preferred a thrilling show of tactical skill over a senseless and devastating ruin. We must always remember this highly organized sport firmly rested upon a profoundly dark foundation of extreme and tragic violence. Despite the rigorous rules, a single arena mistake could very quickly result in a sudden and unimaginably painful demise. The paralyzing fear of death was completely real, intensely driving these men to fight with an absolute and fierce determination. The massive roaring crowd aggressively demanded a clear winner. The heavy pressure to perform rested squarely upon their weary shoulders. If a severely wounded fighter courageously gave up, he raised one finger to the referee, leaving his ultimate fate to the wild crowd. The powerful emperor listened to his people, cleverly using their collective voice to make his final and devastating judgment. This was definitely not just simple entertainment. It was a remarkably powerful public display of absolute Roman social control, giving citizens the grand illusion of total power over life and tragic death, kept the vast Roman Empire incredibly stable. The Crimson Arena floor mirrored Roman society, where strict military discipline and glorious conquest were highly celebrated. Every defensive block and truly brutal strike perfectly reinforced the eternal Roman values of courage, endurance, and martial strength. It was an absolutely perfect system, carefully turning deep human suffering into a very highly profitable political theater. As the golden sun sets over the massive Colosseum, we finally see the truly magnificent nature of these ancient fighters. They were remarkably like modern fighting champions, but ultimately forced to survive in a remarkably unforgiving society. Legally, they were the absolute lowest social class, entirely stripped of their rights and coldly treated as mere living property. Yet paradoxically, the Roman public elevated these outcasts to the extraordinarily high status of living gods. Young kids happily played with wooden gladiator toys, while famous poets wrote wonderfully epic songs praising their historic victories. Their iconic faces were painted on tavern walls, and their incredibly legendary names powerfully echoed through the busy Roman streets. Wealthy women adored them, powerful men bet heavily on them, and even the greatest emperors secretly admired their epic courage. This remarkably deep contradiction truly reveals the incredibly dark psychological core of the ancient Roman civilization. A brilliant culture that built great aqueducts and wrote extraordinary laws also completely normalized the tragic ruin of men. They believed that witnessing controlled tragic death successfully prepared their citizens to face the incredibly harsh realities of war. The fiercely crimson arena was not just for cheap thrills. It was a carefully and masterfully built temple of pure Roman power. Here, unpredictable nature and savage barbarian enemies were spectacularly conquered and tamed by the grand Roman Empire. To thousands of cheering Romans, a victorious gladiator was the absolute living proof of their powerful nation's great destiny. He perfectly represented the glorious triumph of strict discipline over chaos, and of pure martial art over unrestrained savagery. The monumental Colosseum forever stood as a massive monument to this dark blend of architecture and tragic human cruelty. Next time you vividly picture a desperately helpless slave on the crimson sands, please remember the truly complex truth we found today.
Remember the brilliantly skilled athletes who courageously chose to risk absolutely everything for a fleeting moment of eternal fame.
Always remember the incredibly rich businessmen, the expert ancient doctors, and the deeply disciplined referees who managed the games. These phenomenal fighters were tragic prisoners of a ruthless system, but they were absolutely never merely helpless or weak victims. They spectacularly carved a truly proud legacy into the stone of history, using only their epic courage and a razor-sharp sword. Their incredibly fascinating story powerfully proves that true history is rarely as simple as the dramatic myths we are often told. The true Roman arena was a terrifying masterpiece of deep ambition, boundless greed, and ultimate survival. Do you truly think these iconic gladiators were just incredibly poor slaves? Or were they the ultimate, extraordinary athletes? Share your profound thoughts on this incredibly dark history in the comments below. We would absolutely love to read your deep insights. If you thoroughly enjoyed this historical journey, please like, share, and successfully subscribe to our channel for more history videos.